Hi, my name is Andy Winder, and I'm a co-author of the blog The Life, LGBT Mental Health at Healthy Place. And so for this entry, I kind of wanted to talk about how I realized that I was transgender to go along with my blog post on what it means to be trans. And so for every trans person, this experience is different. Some people recognize it at a really young age. Some people don't realize that they're trans until they're adults and kind of have more exposure to the trans community. Um, and so a little bit of background about myself. I was born female, but I identify as male, and I use male pronouns. Um, and I'd felt that disconnect between my body and my gender identity from a pretty young age. But it didn't start to become distressing until I was a teenager, just because as I'd started to go through puberty, my sense of self and my body became more and more different over time in ways that were really distressing for me. And I remember in particular reading a young adult fiction book about what the author described as a girl who wanted to be a boy, which I think she was trying to write a transgender character but didn't quite use the right terminology, which is kind of unfortunate because that would have helped me a lot at the time. But I remember identifying a lot with that book character and thinking, I wish I'd been born male too. That would have been a lot easier and a lot nicer in terms of not feeling that disconnect between my body and how I felt inside. Um, and so for the next couple of years after that, I remember thinking that besides that book character, I was the only person in the world that felt that way, and that I just have to deal with that pain for my entire life. Until in high school, when I started hearing more about transgender people, and in particular transgender men, which before I think I'd heard a little bit about trans women, usually in negative context just because I'd grown up in a really conservative area. Um, and the more I learned about trans people and what it meant, I guess, to have gender dysphoria, or that like discomfort between your biological sex and how you perceive yourself, I started to realize that I also felt that way. And I remember in particular when I was 16, I was riding my bike around my neighborhood, and I just was thinking a lot about my gender identity and what I'd heard about these trans people. And it just sort of hit me like this wave all of a sudden that I felt like a man, even though I'd been born female, and that I probably would have those feelings the rest of my life, and that they weren't going to go away. And I remember feeling a lot of sorrow and guilt that I had those feelings, and that I probably was transgender. And those feelings followed me for a long time after that. It wasn't until college that I started going to counseling, and I started going to support groups and meeting other people in the transgender community that were living healthy and happy lives, that I realized that I also could have a happy life and be confident in my trans identity, and that being trans didn't mean that I wasn't worthy of love or that I wasn't a good person. And so that's a little bit about my experience. If you're also transgender or part of the LGBT community, I'd love to hear your story as well on how you came to terms with that part of yourself. So yeah, thank you for listening.